Here we have the Seiwa pricking iron from Goods Japan. Now these ones I haven't bought. Simon at Goods Japan was kind enough to send me these irons for the review, and they are quite interesting. Now these ones are 4mm, and I have the 6 tooth and the 2 tooth option. They come packaged up with a little bit of information, which is mainly in Japanese. Just pop these out. And first impressions. Well, very much like the Craftshaw, they are robust, strong little tools. They again do look very much like they're going to do the job. They appear, and it is quite easy to match these up. Yeah, they appear to match quite nicely, and the 2 tooth is going to match the 6 tooth, which is very important because you don't want a straight line going into a curve and find that it differs ever so slightly. Now these are available from Goods Japan, so you can click on goodsjapan.com and find these under Seiwa. They do the 3mm option, 4mm option, 5mm and 6mm. So these are the 4mm, and these will give me 6 stitches per inch, and we're going to have a go with that. Now the teeth seem a little chunky, so we're going to use a heavier thread and see how that goes. But the width of the tooth is 1.5mm, so 1.5 mm, so that's going to give a nice narrow. But the overall length of the tooth is 3mm, and that's quite long, and that's what's going to give us a large hole and potentially require a slightly heavier thread. But these are 6 SPI, and the teeth increase and decrease proportionately according to the size that you have. Rather than have the same tooth size closer together for a smaller stitch, the tooth size reduces, so it will give a smaller hole if you go for the 3mm. It will give a slightly larger hole if you go for the 5-6mm, and so on. Now the depth that this will cut to is 7mm, so you're definitely going to go straight through 2 pieces of 3mm veg tab. Any more than that and you're looking at layering. Smack these layers, mark the next one, smack that layer, and then put them together for stitching, and that can be done quite easily, especially with a tool like this. The holes are going to be very consistent. They are remarkably consistent, so if you do hit 2 layers of leather separately and you put them together, the holes are going to line up perfectly. And that's one of the nice things about these stitching chisels or stitching irons, that if you do mark your holes or make your holes separately on 2 pieces of leather, you know that they are consistent. If you overlap a couple just to make sure as you're going along, you're going to have no issue. With a wheel, sometimes that could be a little inconsistent. That's going to help to remove that. Now the material that they're made from is high carbon steel, and I understand they're hardened, so Seiwa are of the opinion that they would rather have their tool break than bend, so this is going to be a fairly robust and hardy bit of kit. There's a number of people that have contacted me about the Seiwa. They're very happy, they've been using it for some time, and it's very, very strong. It's not going to fail you. And for the cost, and you're looking at between £8.77 to £15.59, and this one in particular is £14.94, under 15 quid with free shipping from Goods Japan. Really, 15 quid for something of that calibre, that strength, that's good value for money. I really do think it is. It's not expensive. If it's a project or if you're learning like much of the others, if you're looking at starting out and you want to have a go, or if you're struggling with your stitching, and particularly with your awl work, you'd spend as much on this as you would buying an awl hafted blade and putting it together. So in the grand scheme of things, really, it's a no-brainer. For that sort of money you can invest. very little effort in getting a tool that will give you high return. There's something to consider very, very seriously. Now, these are very, very similar and in looks almost identical to the craft shaft, but I'm led to believe that the materials and the tolerances on this are a little better. Now, it has stamped very faintly in the back, made in Japan, whereas the craft shaft has Craft Japan on there, and on the other side it's stamped up with a number 4, so you know which one you're getting. But to be fair, it becomes quite obvious if you have a few of them which one you have from the size of the tooth. I'm quite happy with it. I really am. Yes, it's big and chunky. I'm getting a visit from the dogs by the sounds of it. This is going to give me a reasonable size hole, so I'm looking at 1 to 1.2 mil thread to fill that hole. And then if you reduce the sizes down, then the thread changes to suit. So let's get a piece of leather first and foremost and see how this performs. So we'll just run a line down the edge of our leather, and again it's black oxide finish. The teeth are bare. It's got this knurling, which I quite like because it makes it very easy to grip. It's a round shaft to the tool, and because you've got that knurling, you can grip it quite nicely, and getting the angles for the line feels very, very comfortable. And you can pop that on there. Because these come to a point, it's very easy to seat them straight into the line, and in doing that, that's going to give you a very, very consistent stitch line. Goes in a dream, very sharp hole, comes out very, very easily. Goes through, we've got a good 1.5 there, comes out very, very easily. Now, a lot of people have been talking about this, and I'm just going to ruin the back side of this one very slightly, and I'm very happy with the irons. So I've taken the 2-prong and I've polished it, because they're not necessarily rough, but there's enough friction there that they are going to start to stick into the leather, although that came quite easily. So what I thought I'd do is I'd polish this up, and I've sanded the rough edges off and then put it on the mop and polished it up. And I've got to say that's quite an interesting result, because we'll do the other side just with the 2-prong, having polished it, and we'll see what difference it makes. Now that goes in very, very easily, but more importantly it comes out. And taking your hands off the article to keep on pulling out the tool just makes the whole thing last longer. The 2-prong, because you're making so many holes, that will become a little bit of a pain. Polishing it up makes it a little easier. Now what I did there was put one tooth into the last hole and then marked for the next, but what you can do is mark that and then do 2 holes at the same time, and that still comes out, and the holes have been made absolutely fine. Whereas when you pop that in there, you've got to sometimes put your hammer down, hold the leather and pull it out. So polishing it up does work quite nicely, and I've only done that with a 2-prong, but that seems to work. It penetrates, it looks good, still gives you a straight line, and it's a lot easier for going around your corners. You can pull it out using your little finger. So there's benefits all round. Now what we're going to do is we're going to be stitching. I think we'll start off with 1 mil. If that doesn't work, we'll do another row stitching beneath it and we'll have another look at that, but we'll look at 1 mil. And we'll see what that performs like. That's quite a large hole, but however the angle's very nice. That's a good 45 down there. It's 1.5 mil wide. There's a good distance between each tooth, and there's a nice shape to each hole, and hopefully that's going to give us a really nice looking stitch. So let's take it to the clam, have a look at the stitching and see how it performs. Okay, 1 mil bonded polyester tiger thread to John James number 2 needles, and let's see how that goes. That went through that hole without any issue at all. No all, plenty of space. This probably would have taken a 1.2mm thread, but given the size of the gap between each hole, and whilst it seems like a big hole, actually I think it's fairly proportionate, but given the size of the gap between each hole and the fact that I'm stitching with 1.1mm thread, this is going to give a very, very, very strong seam. If you're stitching some outdoor gear or something particularly chunky, or if you want something very, very robust looking, this is going to give you, I think, exactly that. And not just looking robust, but being robust. I think the strength, I mean, look at that, the speed of that, that's 1.5 inches of stitching. It took no time whatsoever. I know it's only 6 stitches per inch, and there's not many stitches on there, but if you are doing a long run, 6 SPI is not a bad one to do to get it out of the way. Let's have a look. That's not bad. It's not banged down yet. Let's give it a tap with the hammer. Clean the wax off. Look at that. That's an awesome little stitch. 15 quid. High quality. Closes up the holes nicely. Lays the stitching really well. 1mm thread. It would probably work on 0.8 as well. That would look nice. In fact, I'll tell you what, let's push the boundaries. I'll go off camera, I'll do another row of stitching or another row of holes under here, and we'll do 0.8. We'll drop it down just to have a look, see what it does, because I think there's a bit of range to this iron. So bear with me and we'll see where we go. Okay, another row of holes underneath. John James number 2 needles, but this time 0.8mm thread. And let's have a go at this, see how this looks. And again, stitch is a dream, takes no time at all. Very, very easy to use. Basically, if you can use a ruler, I think you'll get a straight stitch out of this iron. There's nothing wrong with starting off with the stitching irons, getting your confidence to a reasonable level in your stitching, and then moving on to pricking irons. And even if you have to use an awl to line up, the holes will assist in guiding the awl so you head through at the right direction, and that'll get your muscle memory up. Let's have a look at that. Very similar. The holes are slightly larger because the thread is slightly smaller, but nonetheless, let's give that a tap down and see what that looks like. Just close those holes up. Giving it a good thump just to close that leather down. And that is very nice. I've got to say that the 0.8 looks very, very similar to the 1mm. But if you look at the little tails, you'll notice there's a difference in the size. But they're both stitched very nicely. I think this is a little sleeker. So really, I would say that if you had 0.8 1mm thread and you bought the Seiwa 4mm, you wouldn't be disappointed. So in conclusion, folks, if you were to buy the Seiwa under £15, that's the 4mm, you wouldn't be upset. I think that's good value for money. It's a very robust tool, and I am going to do this, really. Yeah. It will go into wood like a nail. You can give it a wobble and you can pull it out, and there is no detrimental effect to it. You can see that nothing has bent. That's strong. That really is quite outstanding, and it gives you a very smart, very even and very consistent stitch. A winner for that price, really. You get the set of those, you can stitch anything. You really can. Give them a polish, you see how easy that will go into the leather. Yeah, it always happens like that, doesn't it? And come out. I'm probably being a little enthusiastic with the smack. But certainly you can manage it if you get the technique right, rather than having to constantly come back to it like so. How's that? Nice little tight circle with the 2-prong, and you can manage it with one hand. It doesn't take long. Stitch that, it'll be beautiful. Folks, yeah, you can spend a lot of money on pricking irons. You really can. You don't have to. You can get quality for a good price. How long this will last, I don't know, but you've seen me hammer this into wood. I think it would last. If you don't do that and you look after it, I think it will last a good length of time. That's not going to fail you easily. If that breaks, it's because of something potentially you've done, like hammering it into a log. Avoid doing that and just do your leather. You shouldn't have an issue. Definitely, definitely an iron to look for. Definitely one that I think most people should have in their toolbox. I think for awkward situations where I'm going to struggle with certain things, I'd probably be inclined to fall back on this. And it may be that I might even have something simple and I will stitch it with this and let you know how I get on. Make an article beginning to end using the stitching irons as opposed to the pricking irons. But folks, I hope you enjoyed it. Again, you can get the pack from my website at www.armitageleather.com/shop. It's down the bottom there. You can download all the specifications for the sheets and the PDF. Have a look, see what you think. Subscribe, like me on Facebook, and give me your thoughts and feelings. Thank you. Just to touch on something before we finish. All of these irons have been tested using 3mm veg tan shoulder, which looks okay, but it's ropey and rough on the back. That doesn't present the stitch particularly well. So what I've got here is a piece of 4mm English Sedgwick bridal. This is a good piece of leather. So I think it only fair to at least try one piece of leather with one of these irons. I'm going to pick the Seiwa. Now that is tougher to go through and tougher to get out, but it's a denser, better quality leather. It's stuffed with oils and waxes at making. and there we have a row of holes. I'm going to put this on the clam. I'm going to stitch it with 0.8. Okay, 0.8 white, John James number 2. I'm going to stitch it without a cast. It's 4mm leather, it shouldn't need it. We'll centre the thread up and then we'll see how this stitches. I've done it in white so you can see exactly how it looks. Just raising that thread up to the top of the hole each time. There are all sorts of little techniques for making sure your thread's seated properly. There we go. Almost done. Last one. And then we'll take it off and have a look. Let's just snip those threads off. There we are. And more importantly, that's the back. Now let's just clean that up by giving it a tap. How's that? The difficulty with white is it picks up the wax. But if you were to stitch like that, and there's no cast on that, if that was an important face I'd be inclined to stick a cast on that and that would just angle it a little further. But front and back, that stitches up nicely. You wouldn't be disappointed at all, would you? So decent piece of leather does make a huge amount of difference.